Have you ever felt like some things in life only happen when you stop trying so hard? Maybe you spent months searching for a solution to a problem, and the answer appeared the moment you gave up worrying about it. Or perhaps you tried to manifest something, a job, a relationship, a major life change, but nothing happened until you let go of control. But is that just coincidence? Or is there something deeper going on in our brain when we release our obsession with the outcome? The idea that letting go might actually help our desires come to life feels counterintuitive, especially for those of us who are more logical and analytical. After all, in nearly every area of life, we learn that hard work and focus are the keys to success. So why does manifestation seem to work in the opposite way? That's the dilemma we're diving into today, but not with mystical or philosophical answers. We're going to explore neuroscience and cognitive psychology to understand what actually happens in the brain when we practice intention without attachment, and why this might make all the difference in how reality unfolds around us. Over the past few years, various studies have revealed fascinating insights about the role of attention, emotion, and mental state in how we perceive and interact with the world. And one of the most surprising findings is that the human brain isn't designed to function well under extreme pressure and obsession with results. Instead, research suggests that relaxed and receptive brain states allow new neural connections to form, previously unseen opportunities to become visible, and our own behavior to align more naturally with what we truly want. If that's true, then the secret to manifestation may not lie in forcing a desire, but in knowing when to direct intention, and when to let the process flow on its own. To understand how this works, we first need to examine what happens in the brain when we push too hard toward a goal, and why this over-efforting can actually backfire. If effort and persistence are so highly valued in every area of life, why does too much control seem to work against us when it comes to manifestation? This phenomenon can be explained by a psychological concept known as the law of reversed effort, popularized by British philosopher Alan Watts. He argued that the harder we try to force something, the more difficult it becomes. Neuroscience supports this principle. Our brain has a complex system for regulating attention and focus, governed by the prefrontal cortex. This region is responsible for planning, logical reasoning, and problem-solving. However, when we become overly preoccupied with a goal, the prefrontal cortex enters a state of hyperactivity, generating anxiety and triggering self-sabotage. Think about the last time you tried to remember a name or important detail, but no matter how hard you tried, your mind went blank. Then, hours later, when you weren't thinking about it anymore, the answer popped into your head. That's a direct result of prefrontal cortex overload, which under pressure, actually blocks access to information and insight. The same logic applies to manifestation. Studies on paradoxical cognition, like those led by psychologist Daniel Wegner, reveal that trying to suppress or control thoughts can make them even more persistent. This is known as the ironic process theory. Wegner showed that when you ask someone not to think about a white bear, the first thing they imagine is a white bear. In manifestation, the same thing happens. When we obsessively fixate on a desire and worry about the lack of progress, we're actually reinforcing the absence of that desire. The brain interprets this fixation as a constant concern and activates stress circuits that make it harder to recognize new opportunities. The paradox is clear: the more we try to force reality, the further we drift from what we want. That brings us to a key question: how can we allow the brain to work with us, instead of against us? To answer that, we need to explore how our neural system processes intention, belief, and perception, and that's exactly what we'll look at next. If overfixation on a goal can sabotage its realization, what's the ideal mental state to allow things to unfold naturally? To answer that, we need to understand how different brainwave patterns affect our perception, creativity, and decision-making. Our brain operates across different frequencies of brainwaves, each linked to a specific mental state. Beta waves, 13 to 30 Hz alertness and logical thinking. Essential for task execution, but in excess, they cause anxiety and block creativity. Alpha waves, 8 to 12 Hz, a state of calm and receptivity. Supports insight and creativity by granting access to the subconscious mind. Theta waves, 4 to 7 Hz, linked to deep meditation and imagination. In this state, the brain is more open to new ideas and patterns. Neuroscience studies show that alpha and theta brainwave states are key for forming new neural connections and recognizing opportunities we previously overlooked. In other words, when we relax and let our mind operate in these frequencies, we significantly increase the chances of finding creative solutions and making intuitive decisions. But there's another crucial element in this process, the reticular activating system, RAS. This network of neurons in the brainstem acts like an information filter. Every day, our brain is bombarded with billions of sensory inputs, but only a small fraction reaches our conscious awareness. What determines which information gets through? Whatever we repeatedly focus on. If you've ever bought a car and suddenly started seeing it everywhere, it doesn't mean there was a sudden increase in those vehicles. Your brain just became more attuned to that pattern. The same happens with manifestation. When we genuinely believe something is possible and focus on that goal in a healthy way, the reticular activating system, RAS, begins to highlight opportunities and signs related to that desire. There's also an essential role that neurotransmitters play in this process. Dopamine, for example, is directly linked to motivation and focus. When we believe a goal is achievable, our brain releases more dopamine, increasing our drive to take action. On the other hand, when we fixate on the frustration of not seeing results, cortisol levels rise, generating anxiety and blocking our awareness of opportunities. Research on expectation and placebo effects reinforces this idea. Clinical studies show that patients who believe in a treatment, even when receiving a placebo, often experience significant improvements. That happens because the brain anticipates the desired result and adjusts physiological processes to make it real. If belief and expectation can influence biological functions, imagine the impact they have on how we perceive and interact with the world around us. That brings us to a key insight: manifestation isn't a magical process, but a neuroscientific phenomenon linked to how we train our brain to perceive and respond to opportunities. Now that we understand how brain states, the RAS, and neurotransmitters affect manifestation, an important question arises: how can we balance intention with detachment, allowing the brain to work in our favor without falling into the trap of obsession? That's the next step in our journey. Now that we've seen how the brain processes intention and perception, the question becomes, how can we use this knowledge without falling into obsessive patterns? The answer lies in a key concept from neuroscience and positive psychology, the flow state. Flow occurs when we're so immersed in an activity that we lose track of time. Athletes, musicians, and scientists often describe moments where their actions feel effortless, as if guided by something beyond rational thought. This happens because, in flow, the prefrontal cortex reduces its activity, allowing unconscious patterns and creativity to emerge without interference from excessive analytical thinking. And here's the most fascinating part: the flow state is defined by a perfect balance between intention and letting go. In other words, there's a clear goal, but without anxiety or pressure for immediate results. This means that the best way to manifest something isn't to force it, but to enter a mental state that allows your mind to operate at its highest potential. Neuroscience also shows us that relaxation plays a vital role in this process. Studies on meditation and mindfulness reveal that daily relaxation practices not only reduce amygdala activity, the brain region associated with fear and stress, but also strengthen connections between the prefrontal cortex and areas linked to creativity and decision-making. This brings us to a powerful concept known as the law of least effort. Inspired by principles in physics and biology, this idea suggests that nature always seeks the most efficient path to achieve a goal. In other words, the universe, and the brain itself, operate more effectively when there is flow, not resistance. We can see this law in action in everyday life. Have you noticed that when you're calm and confident, things seem to fall into place more easily? That's not luck, it's how your brain responds when it's not overloaded by anxiety or doubt. Studies in positive psychology show that optimistic and less anxious people tend to find more opportunities in life. That's because their minds are more open to new stimuli, and their reticular activating system functions without the blockages created by fear and excessive worry. So, the real question isn't just what you want to manifest, but how you position yourself mentally toward it. If you can align your intention with a state of relaxation and trust, you're giving your brain permission to work optimally in your favor. Now that we understand the importance of flow, detachment, and the balance between intention and surrender, the next question arises: how can we apply all of this in real life? In the next chapter, we'll explore neuroscience-based techniques to train your brain to manifest effectively. Understanding how the brain processes intention and detachment is essential, but real transformation happens when we put that knowledge into practice. The good news is, there are science-backed strategies that can reprogram your mind to manifest effectively, without falling into obsession or emotional blocks. The first technique is neurosensory visualization. Unlike basic visualization, which simply imagines a desired scenario, This method involves activating all your senses. Studies show that when the brain visualizes something with intense detail and emotion, it can't tell the difference between imagined and real experiences. This means that by vividly visualizing a goal, your brain begins to prepare your physiology and behavior to make it real. Another powerful method is strategic detachment. It's based on the idea that after defining a clear goal and visualizing it, the ideal next step is to shift focus away from the outcome and onto the process. This reduces anxiety and allows the reticular activating system to keep working without negative interference. Small habits, like practicing gratitude and acknowledging daily progress, help reinforce this mental state. Cognitive reprogramming is another key tool. Often, our limiting beliefs sabotage the manifestation process. The brain works through repetitive thought patterns, and changing those patterns requires repeated exposure to new beliefs and ideas. Techniques like reality-based positive affirmations and reframing negative thoughts can strengthen new neural connections and shift how we perceive challenges and opportunities. A complementary approach is the connection journal, which involves recording small signs and progress related to your goal. This exercise trains the brain to recognize positive patterns and strengthens the confirmation bias toward success. Moreover, the simple act of writing helps consolidate information in memory and increases mental clarity, according to studies on neuroplasticity. These techniques aren't based on magic, but on solid principles from psychology, neuroscience, and human behavior. Effective manifestation is the result of aligning intention, belief, and action in a natural process, without excessive mental resistance. Now that we've explored how to train the brain to manifest effectively, let's bring all this knowledge together in our conclusion, and reflect on how to apply these concepts practically in everyday life. Throughout this video, we've explored the neuroscience behind manifestation and how the brain can be either our greatest ally or our biggest obstacle in the process. We've seen that, contrary to popular belief, the secret isn't in forcing a desire, but in creating the ideal conditions for it to become reality. We've learned that alpha and theta brainwave states promote creativity and intuition, allowing us to notice new opportunities. The Reticular Activating System, RAS, filters the information we receive based on what we value and believe, while neurotransmitters like dopamine and serotonin influence our motivation and mental clarity. We've also seen how the flow state and the law of least effort show that the best way to manifest isn't through obsession, but through balance, intention paired with letting go. And to apply this understanding, we explored techniques like neurosensory visualization, cognitive reprogramming, and the connection journal. Now comes the reflection. What if the key to transforming your reality isn't absolute control, but your ability to relax and trust the process? If this content resonated with you, share your thoughts in the comments, and stay tuned for more insights on the science of the mind.